Welcome to Heroes First Podcast, sponsored by Fund the First, the nation's leading verified crowdfunding platform for first responders, military, and medical professionals. And now, your host, broadcasting from Long Island, New York, Robert Garland.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining this week's episode of Heroes First Podcast. Each week, you will hear from a new guest that portrays excellence in the first responder, military, or medical professional field. If you are an active or retired member of the service, or even a family member or a friend, then this show is for you. I would like to now present to you our guest for episode 8 of this podcast series, Eddie Molina. Eddie, how are you?
What's up, brother? Good to connect.
Yeah, awesome to have you. So, Eddie, you know what? I was trying to figure it out today. How did we initially connect?
You sent me a message on LinkedIn, which I don't really use LinkedIn. Actually, since you reached out to me, I'm like, man, this is a great tool. So I've been using it pretty much every day. I'm like, I found other people through it. But that's how it started. And you mentioned your Fund the First plan. So I was like, yeah, that does sound very interesting. So that's how it got started. But I'm glad you reached. I really am.
No. Listen, I mean, I'm always happy to connect with new people, and we have a lot of similarities, which is great, obviously, in the law enforcement field and what you do as a contributing writer. But I actually want to get into that if we can. You know, you've done some great articles. I've read a lot of your stuff, and it's pretty incredible. You wrote an article about us. Thank you so much, obviously. But you took it a step further when writing an article about us. You actually tested our platform, which you don't hear about that too often. It's usually you talk to someone in PR and they're like, okay, I'm going to write an article, and they just hear what you're saying. But you took it a step further and you wanted to test out our platform. So tell me about that process. Tell me what you thought.
You know what? I'm not even sure how I had that idea, but I chose the campaign I chose was that veteran campaign. So I'm like, you know what? Let me that came up. So I'm like, let me try the system out, because then if I can understand it better from the first person, I can write about it better too. I know sometimes when people write articles, they just get the information from somewhere and then they put it up. I'm like, no, I wanted to connect a little bit deeper with that.
Right. So I'm actually going to show on the screen right now your campaign. So you started a campaign on the Fund the First platform to really get a full understanding of the verification process, exactly what goes on it. And you did this fundraiser right here, Fields for Valor. Tell us about this. Why did you choose this particular nonprofit organization to raise money for?
Veteran wellness is an important subject to me. I've lost friends to suicide, and I reached out on Facebook, one of those group pages, about if there's anybody that has any organizations, nonprofit, that would be interesting to write about, so I can bring awareness to it. And this is one of the ones that came up, and it just so happened to be it's in Maryland, which is not exactly close, but definitely a day trip. So I went down to go see the guy, checked out his organization, talked to him personally, talked to his assistant, and just seeing kind of like where I did with your process, where I opened up the campaign to understand Fund the First. I wanted to see his stuff live and in person to understand it. And sometimes people worry about, is this a real charity, or how do I know how much is going into it versus how much is going into administrative fees? And he's married, and he lives out, his wife makes a living for them. So 100% of everything he gets goes right into that function that he does at the farm, which I thought was fantastic. So there is no overhead. Everything is already paid for. They're just looking to build and scale it because it's at that point. So it was good to see this charity and to see it live, to know that it's genuine, authentic, and I've been there and I could verify it. So this is why I wanted to, bring more money to it, because I know, to me, it's real because I was there.
You take it even a step further. Now you're verifying nonprofits, you're verifying businesses, platforms, all this stuff. Oh man, you should be like, what are those websites that do, test out this and get paid to do this? It's like, you could do that. You could really hammer that away, but you take the initiative. That's the difference. You're not asking, or being paid to do that. You're actually doing it because you genuinely care and you want to understand how these things work.
Absolutely. And it was a good day trip, and I ended up seeing old friends that live out in the DC area. So it was two birds with one stone kind of thing. But yeah, to live it, to understand it, it helps to write it so other people can, go see it through my eyes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So this campaign that you did, it was nice. You only hosted it for a little. I know you just wanted to get it up, running for a little, then close it out so you understood the process. But hey, $200 is $200 to a nonprofit organization that you were able to give to them. So that's great. It's definitely incredible. I'm sure they were very, very thankful for that. But now that you were able to understand the process, you also wrote an article, and now, I mean, I'm sure you're having thousands upon thousands of people that see your articles because you publish on where I know you've done Blue Magazine, Law Enforcement Today. You do a lot of freelance as well, right?
Yeah, I connect, and freelance is a misnomer because they get paid. I don't get paid for anything. I
Okay.
do it out of goodwill to get people to know that organization exists. They get to know that your organization exists. So to me, it's kind of a creative outlet. But I've connected with Law Enforcement Today. I've sent them plenty of stuff that actually have done well. Connected with Police One recently, and then I branched off to a couple of military websites, which I'm working with at them as well.
That's great. So you spent time in the military, right? You were in the Army?
Yeah, 10 years in the National Guard. Yep.
Oh, wow. Thank you for your service.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Were you overseas at all?
Yeah, I deployed in 2008 to Iraq. We were doing detention operations, which is basically running a facility, housing war criminals, and it was there were interesting people there because the guys that were detained were part of Saddam Hussein's regime. So they were the high level political guys, high level generals, um, but they were boring. It wasn't a high intensity, high pressure type of deployment. It was pretty boring, but it was important. It was very sensitive because everybody knew about it from the Pentagon up and down. They know about this one facility because it's highly sensitive internationally anyway. So we had to make sure it was run properly and within the guidelines because this was all after the Abu Ghraib stuff, which kind of changed everything over there. So it was even more important to make sure it runs smoothly. And they've had issues there before we got there.
All right. All right. So that's so you spent time overseas. So what made you join into the military? You have family in the military?
My brother joined in the 90s. I kept hearing, I was delivering pizza in 1998, and I kept hearing 1015, which is the New Jersey news about the National Guard. I'm like, maybe I could test the waters there because it's part time, so I don't have to leave, go active duty, but I can still get involved. So I joined in '99, and then it helped pay for school. I got out after a few years, went to the workforce, got back in because I wanted to finish up. I wanted to go back to school and kind of take a different career path.
That's great. So tell us about your next career path after that. So I know you have a law enforcement background too, but did you go right into law enforcement or no?
No, when I was in sales, and I was actually very good at sales, it wasn't going anywhere. It was about 7 years. I'm like, all right, I'm making the same money. Like, what's the point? And if I'm going to get older and the money is going to be the same. So I took a step back. I was like, I got to go back to school, get a degree, do something, maybe give myself a better chance and then find something else. And while I was at school, a friend of mine who I met in the Army had suggested taking the civil service test, which is what I did. And that's how I ended up in it. And then that kind of started that ball. And that was 2007.
Okay. Oh, wow. So I got it on 2008, law enforcement.
Yeah.
So we still got a few more years left, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is, everything I do on the side is part of that creative outlet. I'm like, I got to do something else. I don't mind doing it. I just got to do something else to get my mind off the job because, it can wear you down.
No, it definitely can. I mean, the job is, you understand this because you've written about it before. Mental health is so important. Staying active and healthy is important. Building relationships with other people, speaking. What we're doing right now for the law enforcement community is, especially all first responder military communities, people need to talk. You got to be able to talk. And when you hold things in, that's where it builds up. And, even though, you have 14 years, I got 13 years, it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but we've seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And you normalize it. You
Mm-hmm.
don't realize it. You just, all right, this guy dead, whatever. What time is am I going home?
Mm-hmm.
How long is the paperwork going to take? So you don't really think about it. And it wasn't until I went on vacation. This was 2011, and we were in the Caribbean islands, and I just couldn't get comfortable. I didn't like the scene, the atmosphere. I'm like, I wish I would stayed home. but we were there, and it ended up being a good vacation. But I just couldn't get comfortable.
Right.
And then maybe at some point down the road, I think it was a training class, and it just popped and it hit me. I was like, maybe because of the job, it changes the way I see the world. Because now I'm thinking this person could be potential threat. Like you're looking at everybody like they, no, you can't tell the difference. So I'm like, that's not good that you're seeing these people as potential threats. They're just people, and 99 for whatever percent of them are that's what they are, and that's it. So then I realized it, because prior to entering law enforcement, I'm like, I'm too smart, I'm too tough mentally. I'm like, it'll never change me. I got this. Like, watch me, guys. I'm like, you guys will probably fall apart, but watch me. And then it's not that I fell apart. Then I realized, you know what, I am. The job will change you no matter what. And that's what I tell the recruits now. I'm like, think all you want, it will change you. Just be aware that it changes you, and don't let it change too much. Just be cognizant of the fact that it could change you, and it probably will, more than likely. I have yet to somebody that says they started the same day as they are 10 years later.
Oh, no way. No way. I mean, no way. I'm a totally different person than I was when I first came on. I'm sure you are too. It's the nature of the job. It's the nature of the people that you're around. It's nature, like you said. There's actually, have you been on Clubhouse?
No. What is that?
Clubhouse is awesome. So it's if you have an iPhone. Oh, you don't have an iPhone, do you?
I'm a Droid guy all the way.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, because I'm texting. I'm like, he doesn't have an iPhone. What's going on here? So,
I guess it's equivalent then.
It's going to be on Android soon.
Okay.
But it's basically like a radio talk show, but you could jump into different channels and talk about things. And what you brought up, I was in a military channel with a lot of law enforcement guys also, and just like yourself, and they were all speaking about how you take it home and you be out with your family and you think everyone could be a potential threat. You don't know who the threat is going to be. And I saw it. I mean, it got to a point where I had to put on so many shutters. I worked in narcotics for 6 years, and I could spot a hand-to-hand from a mile away. And it got to a point where I'm in the mall with the kids and my wife, and my wife's on the job, and she's like, "You got to stop." And I'm like, "That guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. It's happening right now, Dan." It's like, we see it, and it's very hard to turn off. It's really hard to turn off, and it's something, it's a weight that we basically carry with us. And hopefully one day it disappears, but it's not a bad weight also. When you think about it, especially having kids. How many kids do you have?
2. You just met them.
See, so that was both of them. I didn't realize.
Yep.
Okay. Look the same. How they're not twins, right?
No, they're a year apart, 14 months apart.
Wow. Okay.
Should have been, but they look like twins because the one's growing faster than the other one, so they're kind of catching up, or one's catching up to the other one.
Oh, that's gonna be fun as they get older.
Yeah. Well, taking it one day at a time. That's the only way I can survive. And I know some people say you're gonna miss the diaper changes those days. I'm like, there's no way in the world.
Nope.
So glad we passed that, because dealing with them two at 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 by myself for the first couple hours of the day was tough. The first few years were tough. And it was actually tough on our marriage, really. And we had kind of came together and figured out a plan, but it was stressful, and you throw that in there with the job, and I could see why. And I tell the recruits this, I'm like, yeah, everything's easy the first couple of years because usually you're single, usually you're living at home, life is pretty simple. Fast forward 10 years, you meet someone, you get married, you have a mortgage, you got bills, and now you might have marriage problems, and then now it's a little bit more complicated. So that what's feeding what? Like, are you feeding the job problems, or is the job feeding you problems, or is it more than likely all kind of combined somehow?
It's all kind of combined.
Yeah.
It all comes together full circle. But that's why we need outlets. And what you're doing with writing, I mean, that's a perfect outlet. Perfect outlet. So what's been one of the best things that you've written about? Maybe outside of law enforcement. Have you written outside of law enforcement and stuff like that or not?
Military and law enforcement and first responder. There's so many, man. I talk to so many dudes, and now I'm scheduled to talk to the wife of a guy. She had her own issues. But you hear it all the time. You hear the stress, how close they were to killing themselves. Somebody had a gun in his mouth. Somebody was putting the noose up, and his wife walked in. Another guy, he just couldn't get out of bed every day. And it's just over and over again. You hear the same story, the same patterns. So that's just what keeps me. I want to be a part of the solution.
Mhm.
I want to tell people, hey, if this fits you, it's okay. You can get out of it. You can dig out of it because someone has done it before. And if they can do it, why can't you? And I try to inspire people. I'm like, here's one example. Here's another. But as far as most interesting, I would say about a month ago, more like 2 months ago, I spoke to Tom Satterley. He's on Facebook. I'm not sure if you've seen the name, but he did 25 years as a Delta Force operator. He was also part of the Black Hawk Down mission. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So he was there. He was in that mission. He was part of the first team that secured the first helicopter. He was part of that Mogadishu Mile. I don't know if you remember the end of the movie where a bunch of guys are running back. He was on that crew.
Wow.
And then from there for the next 25 years, he was just on constant deployments. Fast forward to Iraq, he's hunting down Saddam Hussein, hunting down those guys. So he was part of that as well. He retired after 26 years, and it started. He went to get a job, and it kind of started piling up. And then, he just went down the same rabbit hole that a lot of other veterans went to. And now he kind of dug his way out. He met his now wife, who kind of saved his life, the way he puts it. And now he's on a mission to save people like that, to include veterans. I mean, to include first responders, police. They just need more money to build, to help, everybody. Obviously, they can only help so many people with a certain amount of money. But that was one of the more fascinating stories because of his past and his history and his expertise in his field.
Wow.
And if you could think a guy like that suffers the same way a private would or a patrol officer, it can happen to anybody.
No, yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, it's important that you're able to get those statements that they make and their stories out there to people, so people understand that you're not alone. You're not alone. We're always here to help. We're always here to give guidance, to be a support system. And a major problem is the stigma. There's the stigma with law enforcement, especially. And it's being afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I definitely believe that the stigma is still there, but I have hope, and I hope it's not misplaced, but I have hope that that's breaking.
Yes, let's hope.
Yeah, and you hear it more and more, and that's why I do what I do. I want to be part of that message. I'm like, if this is an important subject, so I want to put it out there to help break the stigma, even if it's just scratching the surface. It's something. I got to do something. I can't just sit back and watch, especially after talking to everybody and just hearing the same thing. It makes me believe it even more and more and more, each time I talk to somebody new and they have a similar story.
No, yeah. Yeah. So what else? What are some more stories that you've come across that have been compelling? Maybe a funny story. I'm sure you've come across some guys that have had some serious humor. I mean, whenever I try to tell a story about something that's happened at work, my wife's always like, "That's not funny." I'm like, Okay, fine."
Funny. You know what? No, I'd love to speak to somebody that has more of a funny approach to life. But sometimes I write articles about people that do interesting things. It's not necessarily funny, but it's not problematic either. It's just their story. And one of them was Jack Garcia, retired FBI. He infiltrated the Gambino crime family and busted, basically broke down that whole network. So I spoke with him, and that to me was very interesting. I'm like, all right, it's different. So let me write about that. It hasn't been published yet. It's still floating out there, but that should be coming out soon. But that was more the interesting stories that I've come across.
Oh, it's got to be interesting. The crime families are insane. I had a wire case back in 2018. It was from 2017 to the end of 2018 that I was running it, and they weren't necessarily a crime family, but it was a group. It was a gambling ring, drugs, guns. It was interstate. It was running from New York, Georgia, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Florida, into Puerto Rico. We couldn't get the guy in Puerto Rico though, unfortunately. Just
Right.
never happened. Upstate Yonkers, all over Manhattan, but they were running a gambling ring right in the middle of 6th Avenue on East 10th Street.
Yeah.
West 10th Street, I'm sorry. West 10th and 6th. It was a $2 million estate where they were doing this gambling ring from. And what's funny is when I first started this this investigation, we do background checks on everything, obviously. And I won't state the programs that we use and all that kind of stuff. But when I was running this exact location, because we were buying drugs out of it, I was like, okay, I need to figure out who's living there, who's paying the property taxes, who's doing all that stuff. The first name that pops up is Melissa Joan Hart. And
Funny.
I'm like, am I buying into a celebrity right now? What is going on? You know, and everything was still tracked to that family, but they used to live there. So they lived at that house, but it just, for whatever reason, the deed never turned over properly. So it looked like it was still them. So like my building was going a little crazy. They're like, oh no, what do we have to do now? Because there's celebrities involved and what's going on, you know? But
Yeah, changes everything.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, a lot of things were changing, but luckily it didn't end up being that. But that was you know, taking down these rings basically, you know, these big rings, and you've heard from people before. It's incredible. And you know, to be able to get that off the streets and to protect people for that moment, it's special. But
Right.
unfortunately, someone else just rises up, you know.
Melissa Joan Hart. She was. What was she known for? I know the name. I just can't put a face to it.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Was she also the Blossom girl, or is that somebody else?
Uh,
There's some like Nickelodeon thing from the '90s.
oh, maybe she was. Yeah, maybe it was.
Okay, so it is who I'm thinking of. I had a huge crush on her back then.
Yeah, I think we all did.
I'll look at that.
Her and the girl from Power Rangers, the Pink Ranger. What was her name? Kimberly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I had that one. It used to be Alyssa Milano up until recently.
Oh yeah, let's not get into that. Oh my God. We go off on a tangent for days with that one.
Yep.
Oh my
That's
God.
another thing. I try not to get overly political
Mhm.
with my writing. Sometimes I can't help it. Sometimes I just, I beat up politicians. De Blasio's a big one. I beat him up quite a bit. Uh, and really, that came from Lebedo, the Scott Lebedo, the Staten Island artist that put up
Mhm.
that big mural of De Blasio holding the Statue of Liberty's head. I don't know if you recall that.
I gotta look into it. I'm drawing a blank with it right now. The name sounds familiar, but I'm trying to get it. I'll look
He's,
into it.
yeah, he's very well known, but he beats up De Blasio pretty bad. Like he just tortures him um, to a point where he has to have his own legal team because he's very outspoken and sometimes I do beat them up, but part of it is because like I wish they would walk a beat, just to see what people go through instead of just riding the wave of public sentiment. Like find out what people are doing,
Mhm.
people in uniform, go through theirs so you can understand what they go through. One of the more interesting interviews I did was with Tony Bianco. He's an actor, but he's highly supportive of military and police. And
What is he known for?
he was in The Irishman. Um, his biggest role was in The French Connection, but that's an old movie. That's back from the '70s.
Okay.
And he did a lot of smaller parts like Twilight Zone, things of that nature. But his most recent thing that I've seen him in was The Irishman. I just don't remember which one he was. I only saw the movie once. But he's a very public supporter of law enforcement, and one of his reasons is because he was fascinated with that line of work. So when he took on acting roles, he was always interested in detective, police type roles. So he would go on ride-alongs with cops just to get a feel for the part, get a feel for how they work.
Right.
He saw so much shit. He's like, he understood what cops go through because he went through the process and actually saw that. And that's one thing I wish politicians would do, so they would understand. Even outspoken celebrities that, what knowledge are you basing your opinions on? Like, walk a day in the shoes of a law enforcement officer, and then if you still feel the same, okay, but at least we know what you know. But right now, it's like, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, today's day and age, for some reason, everyone wants to have an opinion, and they want to have an opinion on stuff that they're not knowledgeable in. They just
Right.
want to have, they want to focus that knowledge based on what they're hearing from keyboard warriors, so to call it, right?
Yes.
So, and it is unfortunate. And I mean, something that I always try to advocate for and talk about is we're human. You know, we're not robots. too. You know, we're human, and there is a human side to us. I mean, we see some bad stuff out there on the streets, and we're not treated right. We're not always treated right. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's been situations where we're treated like gold. I mean, I had a situation one year where I was just standing on a foot post. I worked on patrol for a while in Midtown North, Upper Manhattan, and just this little old lady comes over to me. She goes, "Can I get you a cup of coffee?" And I go, "Actually, I'm going to get you a cup of coffee. Let's take a walk." So she puts her arm around me. She's like 95 years old, puts her arm around me, takes a walk, right? And then I walked her back to her apartment. And it was just such a nice feeling because people were watching that, a guy in uniform and a little old lady, and they're saying, okay, I wasn't doing that for attention. I was doing it because I genuinely cared about her coming up to me and being so kind, and that's something that we don't get so often,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
unfortunately, you won't see anybody cover that. There won't be any press on
never,
little incidents
never.
like that,
Mhm.
positive ones, and that's what I try to change. I'm like, all right, is there a positive story out there? Let's talk about that, even if it's. And that's the thing. I don't want to get paid for any of these writing because I don't want anybody to ever accuse me of being having an agenda. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're just doing it to get the wow factor, so you can get people like to read it more. And like, it's not why I do it. Here's proof. I don't get paid to do it. I just do it because this is what I believe. And that's part of the reason why I would never take money for an article.
That's great. That really is great. And you do a great job. I'm going to bring up your website right now. It's pretty cool. You were fortunate enough to get your first and last name as your website, and it's,
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
cool.
I saw when it was taken, but it wasn't active, and they were asking like $700 or $800 for it. Which when the last time I looked, I'm like, I kind of want to, maybe I can negotiate it down to 5 or something. And then that's when I realized that it was available. I was like, all right,
Wow.
jumped all over, and I paid for first 5 years up front.
That's great. That's great. So this is a nice website you put together. You got pictures of yourself, about you, contact information for our listeners. If anybody wants to contact Eddie directly, you could go right to his website at eddiemolina.com, and you could search for him over here. So you got a book also. I didn't even know this. A Beginner's Guide to Leadership. This looks
Yeah,
pretty interesting. Why don't
that's
you
a
tell us about that?
that's a separate project that I've done, um, and actually I can get into that a lot more because
Oh, you
it's
have it
work.
with you. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I have a box here. I'll send you one. Um, but one of the reasons why I wrote that because when I was in the military, I was an officer. I was a lieutenant. I had my own platoon, and I went straight from a training environment to the deployment. So there was very little time in between. Usually, there's some time in between where you're training more, you're learning your people more, you're learning about yourself more as a leader. But I had to learn in a combat zone, so it was stressful. So I made mistakes, but I got through it, and I made the corrections, and I ended up doing okay. Fast forwarded to where I'm in law enforcement, and you know how some departments their promotion is based off testing. So I took the test just like everyone else did well enough. But the other guys, I saw a lot of officers make sergeant, but had no formal experience. They just happened to do well on the test. They studied, they did their due diligence. Um, but I also saw that they were making the same mistakes that I was making when I was in the Army as a lieutenant. They were going through this predictable pattern, and I saw it. Every new guy that made rank, not everyone, some were better than others, but you would still see the same pattern. It's just some would get over quicker, and some would never get over and just get worse. So I'm like, man, how do you not know it? But then I started thinking, I was like, maybe I know more than I think I know, or maybe what I know is common sense to me, but not to anyone else. So that's when I decided, you know what, let me just write down everything I know about what I've learned, and that's where the book came in.
That's great. That's great. Definitely send me a copy. I would love to read that.
Sure thing.
Love to read that.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
always like hearing new perspectives on things, new stories. So I definitely want to read that. So before we run out of time, Eddie, I got to ask two more questions. Actually, you know what? I'm going to ask you one question only because you brought it up. I send out these itineraries of questions and I don't even follow it. It's just basically so like you get your mind going. But I'll ask this one because you brought it up pre-call. And what would be your superpower if you could have a superpower?
Ooh, you know what? There's, there's been many nights where me and the fellas are drinking, and that comes up. And I always lean towards flying. I'm like, flying sounds so cool, man. You just fly, get to wherever you need to get quickly, and you can see things. So that was my initial one. Then I started thinking about it. I'm like, sometimes I look at Hulk and I'm like, sometimes I feel like that. Sometimes I get so angry where, this is where like, how much of it is having kids, having, marriage and stress and work, and how much of it does that play a role? Sometimes I just want to pick up a car and throw it like over the house. So I wish I had that power. But then I'm thinking the kryptonite part, which was the second part of that question, what's your kryptonite? Like maybe that power is a problem too. Because if I relied on that, am I really solving the reasons why I need to get that angry and want to throw a car over the house in the first place? So that is both the kryptonite and a strength that I would go for, but I don't know if it's the best one.
Listen, there's nothing that's going to be the best or the worst, but that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Great answer. I think I got to ask that question more often on this show.
Please do.
So the two questions that I do like to ask. Your career has been awesome. You in the military, law enforcement, to the writing. Would you do it all again?
Yes, I ask myself that all the time because I'm like, sometimes the job, and I'm sure you can attest to this, it beats you down. Sometimes you burn out, and I've hit those spots where I was like, I can't do this shit anymore. But I would do it all over again because then I'm like, you know what, I have good things, so I try to not to be so negative. I'm like, you know what has it given me? What has it created for me? Where I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those choices. So yeah, absolutely would do it all over again. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then since the book of my life's not over yet, so maybe the next chapter is all right. Everything that I've done, how can I roll that into the next chapter of life, and when is that going to be?
That's great. Have you actually do you watch the show The Magicians on Netflix?
No, is it any good?
Well, because you brought up the book of my life. It's actually in part of the show. One of like the realms that they're in is everyone has a book written about their life. So it's pretty cool. So I don't know, maybe that part of the show you would like.
I will check it out, man. I'm currently looking for my next show to watch because I just finished. I forgot the name of that show. But I'm looking for one, and I'm very picky, so I got to go through like 6 or 7 before one sticks. So
it's if you're into magic and kind of like some different angles on things, it's a pretty cool show. Pretty cool show. And there's 5. Yeah, there's 5 seasons. So.
I bought one of those magician kits for my 7-year-old, and I'm playing with it more than he is. So this wand, actually, there's a lot to it. It's not just a stick. Like there's a string that you pull out. Like this. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely could relate to the magician thing.
Oh, good. Okay. So check it out. And then since this is Heroes First podcast, I'm going to ask a question. What does a hero mean to you?
Someone, I put thought into that too. Someone who gets up, doing something that a lot of people won't do, or can't do, or would quit doing it. It's someone who gets up every day and does it all over again, even if it means, getting spit on, getting called names and all that stuff, and just getting up and doing it all over again, because you're doing it for a reason. Everybody's reason is different, but that's what a hero is to me. That someone that gets up and does it all over again for a majority of the population couldn't do.
That's a great answer. That's awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening to episode 8 of Heroes First podcast with our special guest, Eddie Molina.
Can I mention?
See you all next time. Yeah, go Eddie. What do you got?
One website, that same Delta Force guy, I partnered up with him.
You want me to show the website? I'll bring it up.
Yeah, can you? Because I hooked him up with other podcasts, kind of like I did with you with LET, which I thought I did before.
They actually, John Jay called me.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I'm getting on his show in March, which I'm excited about. Go ahead. What's the website? I'll bring it up.
allsecurefoundation.org. So I help them out, hooking them up with different podcasts, different interviews. So they actually formally asked me to represent them, to get them on more interviews, which I agreed. I was going to do it anyway, because helping them is helping the veterans they're helping.
Yeah.
So we did formally partner up. So I just want to mention.
Oh, wow. No One Left Behind, All Secure Foundation, located at allsecurefoundation.org. All Secure Foundation assists special operations warriors and their families heal from the trauma of war. I like this. Donate now. You can donate. This is great. Actually, I'll probably reach out to them as well through Fund the First or through our nonprofit, the Fallen First Reserve. So this is great. Great that you're partnered up with them. Seems like an incredible mission that they have as well.
Yeah.
I like the colors. Gold and black is always good.
Yeah, that's Army for you. But I can connect you with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you do, and yeah, just watch them because they're slowly growing. They'll be on the national stage soon enough.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, again, Eddie, this has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much. And for everyone listening, we'll see you all next time.
Have a good one, everyone.
You've been listening to the Heroes First podcast with Robert Garland. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, share, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, make sure to visit fundthefirst.com and follow us on social media at fundthefirst. See you next time.